Welcome back, everybody. I am Carter Sandvin, and this is the channel for Sandbox Illustration. Today, I am going to take you guys on a nice trip down memory lane, and I'm also going to be telling you about something that is very big for this channel specifically, and it's gonna be big for the channel for years to come, to be honest. Just to kind of clarify what's actually going on, I am currently in the process of developing an animation project. I'm going to be developing a large mini-series, and I want to animate it. And I'll be getting into the reasons why in a second. But I want to kind of go back just a little bit to clarify some stuff that has happened in terms of this animation. So I guess we should probably take it way, way back, technically, just for some nice context. I started writing comics, I started making comics, making my own personal comics. I believe my first ever one that I made was in 7th grade. I basically made my own superhero team akin to the Avengers or Justice League. I can't even remember much about it, and unfortunately, I'm not sure why I did this, but I threw away a lot of my old art growing up, because at the time when I was making it, I was like, oh, this isn't good, I can do better, so I would just scrap it, then I would never touch it again. So then it would just be gone forever. But I digress. And then I created one called Sector 25X later on, which this one was actually funny. This was kind of what started my entire process into wanting to make a story that is all about characters that are reflections of me and the people that I'm closest to. Sector 25X was about a group of secret operatives, in a way, that kind of went on their own under the law missions, if you will. Kind of like Arch, actually. What Arch is, I did that with Sector 25X, except it was me and my friends from middle school. Having these two here showing that, like, I started writing stories at a very young age. And I didn't really think much about, like, how to write a story. I just wanted to write stories. Especially because at the time, I really had no concept of how to write. I just thought, like, okay, I'll just make a story. But stories need to have purpose and a central theme to them. And I didn't know that. I just made stories that kind of went nowhere because, again, there was nothing to unify it. There's that. Now we can jump ahead a little bit in memory lane. We are here to, I believe, November of 2019. Or actually, no, rewind back a little bit. Not November of 2019. This would be early summer of 2019. We'll say June. In that time, I wanted to give myself an art challenge. I wanted to create original characters that were based off of me and my friends. And I actually wanted to make superheroes out of us. And I actually created my own hero called the Artisan, who had a magic wand that acted like a pencil. So you drew like whatever you wanted to essentially come alive. Not come alive, but become an actual object. I have a pencil here, which is like a perfect representation of what I made the wand look like, but like I would basically draw with it and be like, okay, make a spoon. I would draw the little outline of a spoon, and then zap, I would have a spoon right there. I gave Haley the ability to communicate with animals. I did a bunch of those, you know, and I just created them as characters, and originally they were just gonna be their own sketches. Now, at this point, when it was around June of 2019, I kind of forgot about this, and I was prioritizing some other stuff. But then, when we get to November of 2019, back to where we just skipped from, there I actually was like, okay, I'm actually gonna make this a thing. And in fact, I actually have a sketchbook down here, which was my original sketchbook for this project. Oh, right there. Nothing feels cooler to me than seeing like an old, worn down sketchbook, because it just feels like it's just filled with history. So, this is the first page of this project. Showing this sketchbook will give a lot more context into the story as we get further into me explaining all of it. So the first character we have right here is my character. This is Scrawl. I wanted to give my character, like, I wanted to combine my love for art with my love for outdoor adventure. So I tried to give him kind of the almost Nathan Drake sort of feel with his outfit, but then also I needed something that was artistic. So I gave him kind of the backstory of kind of being a vigilant guy, like hiding his identity, and so he had this mask down here. he had this mask that he actually spray painted with an S on it for the name Scrawl. And then everything else is just like, you know, leather jacket. He's got a utility belt with his tools, and then he's got his wand right there, the pencil wand. This is my girlfriend Haley and my brother Spencer, which you guys have seen, I believe, in that one sketch. So I kept the power for her of her communicating with animals. I wanted to give her kind of almost like a Scarlet Witch kind of feel. In fact, I didn't even really notice when I was designing the character, but it's pretty much a blatant rip-off of Scarlet Witch. But that's okay. But I wanted her to have nature vibes. I wanted her to look like she spent a lot of time in the forest with the animals, almost akin to Snow White, which actually, basing her off of Snow White would be kind of cool. Keep that note in there, me. And then we got here, this is my brother's character, Despo, off of Desperado. I believe he had steel skin and bones so that he could constantly do stunts, you know, with a motorcycle, with a car, and anything like that. And I actually did base his outfit here. I tried to combine the Western feel, like the Desperado, and then tried to mix in with that a BMX feel. So I went with the pattern of a BMX outfit, which, by the way, that right there is some creativity from me. I'm very happy with how that looks. My sister's character, Cortex, she has telekinesis and telepathy. Then this is my friend John. He's actually an outer space character that can shapeshift, but the trick with his shapeshifting is he can only change his form. In fact, his color palette always stays the same. So there's always going to be some part of him that has just like a flesh tone, and then the yellow, the black, and the red. This is my friend JJ. You guys don't know him, but he's big into music, and so I wanted to give him instruments that could do different... In fact, I'm going to talk about this for a second. I love what I did with his, because he had instruments that if you played them, they had certain effects to them that they did to the outer world, you know? So he had a bugle, which created a stone golem, which that one I like. That one's really creative. You have a pan flute that can manipulate gravity. The way that I thought of it was like, the lower the note, the more that it just kind of felt like you were like starting to lift up off the ground. But that if you played the highest note, you'd pretty much just be like launched up into the air. So he could go like, and have you just like wiggle in the air. His drum caused earthquakes. His flute summoned an animal army. His harp put people to sleep, which I like that because that's always the thing for dreams, where you have like the that sort of thing. This one, I don't know what made me think of it, but I love it. It's my favorite one out of this. He has finger symbols that make you vomit. Just add in a little trickery there for you. My friend Trevor, he's big into acting. He's trying to become an actor, so I wanted to give him something that was akin to imitating characters and stuff. So he has a magic mask that allows him to shapeshift, that allows him to take the form of somebody that he sees. And so I wanted to give him a big trench coat so that he could actually hide his disguises under there. Oh, here we go. This is my cat Gunther. This is Grudge, which he just shapeshifted into like a werecat. This one is cool. My friend Logan, I made him Longshot, which is, he's always just had this on-running joke of having like an obsession with Russia. So I wanted to make his character a Russian super soldier. He was an excellent marksman, by the way, used his weapons very well. This one right here, I have to thank my friend JJ for this. He just made this design one day. I'm not sure where he got it, but he just drew this and he was like, hey, you should use this for the animation. I was like, I'm cool with that. I love the logo. I love how it looks. One thing that I want to note is that as I was creating these, all of them were kind of getting backstories, or at least I was coming up with backstories. It was just natural with the process, you know, because I was putting in things and I was wondering, well, why am I putting that in there? So I was like, oh, maybe this character could have this flaw, or this character could come from this background. I started to think like, I could make this a story. I could make an actual story that is about me and my friends in a superhero team. And I was like, that would be an amazing comic. But then I was like, well, maybe a comic wouldn't do it justice. Maybe a comic wouldn't show the scenes that I wanted to show in the right light, if you get what I mean. Like, I could picture some of the action scenes in my head, and I was like, them being in a comic wouldn't do this justice. So I decided, you know what? I'm gonna make this an animation. And ever since then, I was like, wow, this is happening. Like, I'm gonna make an animation. Like, I was set on it at that point. So I went and developed this story as much as I could. And in fact, if we look at another folder of mine, we have, boom, Jackals. These are all of the sketches and or documents or papers, etc. that I had for the original Jackals story. Original and then recurring, which I will explain in a second. We have all of these, you know, character designs for them going through. It's my character. You got Skrull right there. Oh, here we go. There's the original sketch. That's the one that JJ made for me. And I was like, I gotta put that into the story in some way. Like, I very much love that. This right here is all of the body sketches, like showing what the actual body is going to look like, so then when I go and animate, I'll have a good idea of the build that I'm drawing. These were some of my attempts at drawing these characters. Yeah, my drawing back in 2019 was not the greatest. It's not bad. It's definitely not bad, and I tried to foreshorten, as you can see. That's pretty good, but that face is not good. This one's a little better. That character's actually kind of cute. I mean, it's based off my girlfriend. No duh. Okay, and then these right here. As you can see, the year is 2021, but I'm gonna go over these last because, as you can tell, there is a recurring theme here going. So it was around the beginning of 2020 that I was developing this story. I was just going along with it. One thing that I was having an issue with was I wasn't really able to come up with a solid conclusion to the story, which I found, and I was like, I don't know how to end this story, because I kept coming up with plots and recurring timelines and stories to put in, but it really didn't go anywhere. So I considered making Jackals like an anthology series that covered, you know, the world of superheroes that was in this and all that. And I will talk more about that idea right there, the one where I couldn't come up with an ending to the story. I'm going to talk about that later because that kind of entails one of the big ideas that I have for this video. But then it was around summer of 2020 that I was getting pretty close to finishing with the story. But then I started to kind of get a feeling of superheroes are just a bit tired. You know, when I was making this story, Avengers Endgame just happened, and so many things were trying to do superhero stories, and I was just wondering to myself, like, I can do something a little more original, I think. So we have this folder right here, and the backstory is back in the summer of 2020, I'd say. I started to feel like, I don't know if this is the route that I want to go with the story. I feel like this isn't the right world or concept for me to put these characters in. I feel like it could be better, you know? So I was considering actually going fantasy, and my big inspiration for that was God of War 2018, which, by the way, is my favorite video game of all time. It's beautiful. It's beyond beautiful. I saw that and I was like, you know, fantasy would be really fun, playing with elves and orcs and magic. So I was like, I can just sort of translate the superhero aspect into magic. And one cool thing that I did have about this story, specifically, in fact, Jackals 2 at the beginning, was that I had categories of power, and there were higher beings that sort of had domain over those categories of power. So there was like the body and health and illusion and the arts and spirit and the elements, things like that. There were categories of power, and so I translated that into a fantasy world too. So this was my next story, The Knights of Sadris, which this was basically just Jackals, except I turned it into a fantasy world, so some of the plot changed with that as well. That was my character, Castor Solberg. I had my character as an elf, which I thought was pretty fun. That was my weapon. My sister's character, that's Haley's character. I believe she's a fairy in this story. And so like I said, how in Jackals, there were higher beings over the categories of power. In this world, since it was magic, each category was a kingdom. And so obviously there were kings for all of them, and Adam's character was actually the king of the kingdom of technology. And that's pretty much all that I did with the fantasy story. I wrote some stuff too as well, and in fact I actually have the notes on my computer. I won't be getting into those because it's not necessary. But then, guess what? I started to feel again like, you know what, I don't like fantasy that much. So I'm gonna try something else. I'm gonna try sci-fi. Let's go sci-fi. In fact, cyberpunk. In this story, I didn't even really focus on characters that much. I created some character designs, but my main focus was world building. And so we started to write the cyberpunk story, and we just kind of felt like, this is not good. Like, this is bad. Actually, with all of our stories, we just kind of felt like, or all of our ideas for a story, I should say, we just kind of felt like, this is really hard for us to develop. The problem that we had with Jackals after a while, after thinking about it, because we considered just doing Jackals again, but it was a completely personal thing for me. I wanted to have fun with the world building. I wanted to create my own world. The story that we had for Jackals was pretty spot on, but I wasn't really that big of a fan of the world because I was like, it's just Earth, and that's not exciting to me, you know? And so for a while there, we were just wondering, like, we'll try and figure out something. And at the time, we were actually going to go with a steampunk world. It was either steampunk or fantasy, I can't remember. We were just deciding, like, which one of these should we go with? And I made the point that it was like, the steampunk world has fantastic world building. It has an amazing world that it's placed in. But Jackals has the story. And after a while, Adam and I actually decided that Jackals was the route for us to go because we could always do whatever we wanted to with the worlds, play with Earth in any way that it still makes sense, of course, but we could still experiment with Earth, and we already have a great story, so we don't really have to worry about, you know, is this character's development any good or not. And it was later on at this point in my life that my writing was getting a little bit better. You know, I was thinking about character arcs, and I was thinking about flaws and things that they brought to the table. I wanted to make sure that a character actually had a purpose in the story, and I tried to play with character relationships so that pretty much every character at one level was connected, and you didn't just have, you know, one random guy that was just standing there to be cool, you know. And Jackals had that. Jackals was really good, and so we were like, you know what? Let's just stick with Jackals. Now I know what you're thinking.
Carter, are you telling me that you started at Jackals, and then you went fantasy, and then you went cyberpunk, and then you went steampunk, and you went through all those stories just to come back to your original story?
Yes, I did. Yes, I decided that Jackals was the best route for us to go. So I began developing that story once again, and I went and tweaked the story, and I was thinking to myself, okay, so we have to figure out what the ending is for this story. And it was actually around this time that I actually started to consider theme as an aspect of stories, and I was like, oh, the theme is the central idea to the story, which means that everything in the story at some level should connect back to this one idea. That is how you have a cohesive story. Now, some people may disagree with me on this when it comes to the actual process of writing stories and developing stories, and that's fine. That's totally fine. You can have your opinion, but I've come to learn that at least my best way of writing stories is I come up with a theme, so then when I'm actually developing the story, I go and ask myself, how does this connect back to the theme, you know? So say the theme is family, you know? Like, how does this connect back to the idea of family? Or maybe it's a story about perseverance, you know? How does this connect back to that? So I was going through the story and I was wondering, okay, what's the theme? And as the story was being more and more developed, I realized that we had a really nice theme of humanity. Well, we had a theme of humanity, I'll say that. But we had the theme of humanity. And we actually made the main villain of the story connect back to the idea that he wanted to end humanity. I know, it's very cliched for a superhero story to be about humanity's good and we must stop the guy that wants to end humanity. And that was one of the problems that we had. That theme was just very cliched and, dare I say, boring. But once I was trying to think about everything with the story, things just weren't lining up. When I was trying to come up with ideas, and I was asking myself that question of, okay, how does this connect back to the theme? I was realizing that I just kept hitting roadblocks, and I kept hitting these spots of, that won't work, and I can't put this in, but it would really work in the story, and then, oh, this character that we developed almost a month back, he's not going to work anymore. And I learned my biggest mistake, which has completely affected how I write stories now. I wrote this story originally without even considering what the central idea was to it. So I just made a story. Not even a story, I just made a series of events with characters in them. It dawned on me that this story is not working because I didn't write it to work for a central idea. I just wrote it because I had these cool ideas in my head. The reason that I came up with humanity for it was I looked at everything that we had, and that was just the best one that I could pick out of what we already had available to us, instead of coming up with your central idea and then writing your story off of that. And I decided, this story just ain't no good. I need to start over. And Adam very comically kind of screamed that this story is never gonna get done. But this was back actually earlier in 2022, and that was when I scrapped this. So we were at like a 3-month period from then on, just trying to wonder, what's a good story? Because this time I had to make it a point for myself to make sure that I actually have a story before I start writing it. No matter how cool the animation is, no matter how cool the characters look, no matter what cool things they can do, what I was making was a story. And I had to put the story first. So for a long time there, I didn't know what I was gonna do for a story. And we went through some ideas, and they were pretty good. To be fair, we did have some pretty good ideas in there. But again, I kind of let my own personal feelings get in the way, which, by the way, I'm not saying that I was wrong for this. I'm just saying that my problems with the stories that we came up with were completely personal. Oh, fuck. Am I gonna keep that in? I think I'm gonna keep it in. Alright, cool. This animation is going to be the largest project of my entire life. Like, everything that I plan on doing with my art in my life, the animation is going to be the biggest thing that I'm going to make. And I wanted to make sure that the story that I made had the impact that it needed to have. I wanted to make sure that my story had scale to it. And I realized that with the stories that I had, they all had plots that were just very, like, small, they felt like, you know? The plots didn't really seem to impact anybody other than the main characters, which that has its place in stories, but I didn't think it did here. And also, one thing that I noticed too was it seems like the most epic stories take place over a long time, because, like, it doesn't seem to make sense to have, like, an epic story that takes place over, like, 2 days. You know what I mean? Like, if you're gonna do something that involves saving the world, it's gonna take a bit longer than 2 days. And that was another thing too, was like, I wanted what these characters did, so whatever the motivation was of the villain versus the hero, I wanted that to affect the entire world. Like, I wanted these characters to save the world. I kind of came up with a formula for having a larger scale in a movie. You need to consider 2 things. One is timeline, the other is worldwide impact, you know? You want the characters to affect the plot affects the entire world. And by the way, that makes your heroes seem a lot better because they are doing something that is beyond them, you know? And if it's over a longer period of time, one that gives more opportunity for more story to come into play, and also it truly feels like there's some stakes there. Like, if you only have a day to save the world, it's like, what? Excuse me? If you look at Jackals, which, again, you guys don't know the plot of this, and that's not my point, though. My point is, the beginning of Jackals, you had my character, Taylor's character, and Spencer's character, along with the rest of the crew. They were all kids. They were little kids. Like, I think my character was 8 years old, at the beginning of the story, and it ends with him in his late 40s when he's already married and has a kid. Like, that right there, that's a story, dude. Like, you see a character fully change. You see a bunch of characters change over a long period of time. I wanted that impact to be there. So I had to go back and take my advice that I had given myself before, which is you need to come up with your theme. And I wanted to come up with a theme that felt like it could have the potential to have a worldwide story, you know? Like, you want a story that is huge, and so you don't want your theme to be friendship. You know what I mean? That's a horrible example, but you want to come up with something like morality, or you want to come up with secrets and truth, or you want to come up with something like fear, which we will definitely get into that coming up here. So I was trying to go through my ideas, and I considered fear. And the reason that I considered fear was I played a little thought exercise with some friends of mine to try and help get some advice on how to make this story. And in fact, I'm going to read you guys the thought exercise. Just start with clearing your head and trying your best to clear all biases of preferred stories and aesthetics. Then, I want you to picture the people around you that you've come to know quite well. Family, friends, romantic partners, even simple acquaintances. Take all of those people. They are now larger-than-life people. With their new wills, strengths, and abilities, they can change the world if they wanted to. But only as a team. This team is the hero of your mind right now. And you have to follow them down a perilous journey where everything can be at stake. With a clear mind, all biases thrown out the window, what genre, what type of world is this group of heroes in? That's pretty beautiful right there, if I do say so myself. So I did that thought exercise with some people to try and come up with my new story. My brother Spencer actually said horror, which is funny because he actually loves the horror genre. And so I was like, horror is pretty fun to play with, you know? Like, what if the theme was fear? And after a long process of thinking and talking with Adam and debating and deciding over what to work with, we decided that fear was actually a really good idea for a theme. And in my notes, I actually wrote down why I chose fear. The reason I wanted to go with this theme is for a few reasons. I think this can be very fun to work with when it comes to the superpowers. It's a very understandable thing for people to battle. It's broad enough that multiple ideas and enemies can be applied, and the theme of fear is not one that is typically expected in a story like this, which is a sort of fantasy, sci-fi, mythological epic. And that right there was what stemmed from me making this new story. And by the way, I tried to tick the boxes that this is cohesive and unified in a literary sense, and I think this is the right way to go with this story. And I am extremely happy with this story because not only does it have the scale where it feels like the entire world is at stake here, but it has a solid theme that everything in the story works off of. And it has exciting characters and an exciting world that it is built in. So I think right now I'm just going to talk to you guys about what I have as a general theme for this story. So it starts off that we have this unique world out there, which I haven't fully come up with a name for yet, but it's definitely not Earth. This world is filled with people that have special abilities. Not necessarily superpowers, not necessarily magic. It's kind of its own thing. You could say it's magic, you could say it's superpowers, but this world doesn't see it that way. And this world does have mentors, which have domain over, I guess you could call, the 11 pillars of this world. And those 11 are the arts, spirit, body, elements, time, mind, illusion, technology, weapons, beast, and health. All of these pillars of this world all have mentors. They have somebody that has domain over this category of special gift. Now, this is a world where pretty much everybody has a special ability. Like, it's very common to. Some people, they are implemented in different ways. Some people are more powerful than others, but pretty much everybody has a special ability. And when it comes to these mentors, you have the Mentor of Illusion, who started to become quite arrogant in how he acted as mentor. In fact, he found it funny to convince the people that had illusion-based powers that worshiping him as a god was the proper way for them to keep the world at bay. He honestly just saw it as a big joke, a big practical joke. The other mentors started to have quite a problem with how he was acting as mentor, and conflicts piled up on top of each other to the point where there was an all-out war between all of the mentors. The war ended, and it eventually led to the Mentor of Illusion being sent away into his own highly secure prison. This was to keep him away from the mentors and keep him in a place where he couldn't do much harm, but he could also still implement his powers. Because the way that mentors work in this world is their main job is to kind of regulate the category that they have domain over. So the Mentor of Elements, he tries to keep earthquakes and floods and forest fires from happening. The Mentor of Health tries to keep diseases from spreading and plagues. And you need to keep mentors alive in this world for that aspect of the world to be regulated and kept under control so that you essentially don't have the apocalypse. Now, this practical joke that he pulled on his people actually was successful, and they legitimately became like a cult around this mentor, and they saw that he was banished, so then they were gonna escape themselves. They all went into hiding. Every single user of Illusion disappeared, and they became like their own secret society. And in fact, we learn later on in the story that they were actually trying to figure out a way to let him out and bring him back up to the home of the mentors. Now, the main group here, our heroes, they are trying to prevent this from happening, and they're trying to find some creative way that he will not come back and basically just cause more destruction within the world and the home of the mentors. That's all that I can really reveal, because a lot of this story is spoiler filled. Like, if I tell you about it now, it's going to totally ruin the story for you. And this is going to be a story where all of the characters are based off of people that I know. And in fact, the main villain himself, the Mentor of Illusion, is based off of Spencer, because he gave me that idea for Fear at the beginning. I know that this was a very long-winded video to talk about my animation project, but I made this video to let you guys know that this animation is going to be very prevalent on this channel. I am going to be trying to do milestones of my growth in the animation process up until the point where I'm finished with the story. Now, granted, this is going to take years, because as it's going right now, I'm the only animator involved, and I have to line up schedules with some other people to try and get the story to work, and just the process of making a story like this takes so long. It's going to be a very long time, but one of the things that I wanted to use this channel for was to showcase you guys my milestones in all of this, and I'm gonna try to do it in a way that I don't spoil any of the story. So I hope that you guys are excited to see more of this project being done along with me and this channel. I guess we will see the next time that I make a video related to the animation, and I hope that you guys are excited about it as I am. So that's all I have to say. Thank you guys so much for watching. This was Carter Sandvin with Sandbox Illustration. Check down in the description for links to more of my content. Make sure to like the video and comment on it, and subscribe for more weekly art-related videos. Anyways, have fun, dudes.